Sorry I can't be there with you as much as I would love to, and as close as we are here in Miami. So I wish I had a more interesting presentation to follow Tom's really multimedia-rich talk just now. But I'm happy to answer questions either in the chat room or by video as they arrive, because I always prefer to have more of a conversation than to give a lecture. But I can start by giving a little bit more of an explanation about who I am, who New World Symphony is, while I pull up my presentation, which hopefully you will see shortly. There we go. Full screen this thing for you. Okay, so Delma, stop me if for some reason you can't see this, but the presentation I'm going to give is actually just a high-level overview of the tools that New World Symphony uses for distance education, and in some cases for live performances. So the New World Symphony is, as was said, an orchestral academy. And what that means is it is a school for postgraduate performance students of major universities, both in the United States, but more broadly across the rest of the world as well. It's a unique building that we have here in Miami, Florida, Miami Beach, Florida, actually. As you can see in this picture, the building itself is meant to be a piece of multimedia. The front building is dominated by this 7,000 square foot projection wall, which we do a variety of things with, streaming movies and simulcasts of concerts that are going on inside of the performance hall. And to complement that, which you can kind of see, and maybe you can see my mouse tracing lines, maybe not, but the piping structures that border the seating area directly in front of the screen are a Dimitri Meyer Constellation sound system, which is a 162 channel audio array system that creates three-dimensional audio spaces in the park. Inside the concert hall, if I can advance my slides. There we go. Inside the concert hall, we have a very state-of-the-art projection system, which provides a 270-degree canvas for visuals. Typically, they're used in this scenario that you see here, which is visuals accompanying a live music performance. Our strategies for using this technology are pretty developed at this point, but it's always meant to provide a narrative support to whatever is happening on stage. Sometimes there will be a dialogue between what happens on the screen and what happens on the stage, but most of the time it's about how do we help communicate the message of the music or the performance that's happening with these supporting canvases for visuals. So the New World Symphony, as I said, is a group of 87 postgraduate music students, and that's a very specific number. That's the personnel of a major professional orchestra. The idea of the symphony is that they are with us for up to 3 years, and in that time take auditions and hopefully earn a seat in a major professional orchestra somewhere. We, as an organization, produce over 100 concerts a year. And unique to this program is our focus on entrepreneurship and building leadership. Typically, orchestral schools are designed to help people become musicians that fit in with an ensemble. We teach them that, but we also teach how to be an individual and a leader within an ensemble. So it's somewhat different. Moving on to distance education tools. The way that I evaluate these tools basically boils down to these 4 metrics that you see here. And these are defined in the following ways. So Ease of use being how difficult is it to actually set this stuff up? How difficult is it to operate once it's set up? Quality when it's operating at its highest capacity. What kind of quality does the solution provide? Latency, which Tom was talking quite a bit about, and how that affects things. So the delay it takes from getting from point A to point B. And then accessibility in the sense of how many people are actually using it, and can I find partners to do these experiments with? So these are just a couple screenshots which show some of our early experiments. Most of the use of this technology for us is in the form of education. So both the screenshot on the left is a master class with violinist Pinchas Zuckerman. You can tell the age of the photo by the large format TV that is being used to show the image. And then on the right is an experimental dance piece with live accompaniment by a couple of New World Symphony brass players. So we got started in 2002 with this type of work and have been doing it since that time. We're going to move into specific tools, and I'm going to start with this grouping of Skype, Google Hangouts, Zoom, FaceTime, tools that we all know and use every day, and they definitely have a purpose and a place, but it is not a universal purpose and place. So some of the good aspects to this type of tool are obviously because they're produced by major manufacturers, major commercial entities, they have broad support for different types of computers and audio and video hardware. They're very accessible because they are free and work with major operating systems. They're typically very simple to operate, although not always. Even the Zoom interface that you see pictured here is quite complex for a beginner. And some of these are applications, some of them work independently in the cloud, so varying needs as far as actual computer resources to function. Some of the bad aspects to these tools in our experience are that it actually creates bad habits in the users, meaning there's a lot of things that these software do to audio and video that is meant to help with traditional verbal and visual communication, but they don't leave the users with an understanding of how to improve the experience using proper lighting techniques, audio capture techniques, and video framing techniques. Instead, they try to fix it for everyone who doesn't know how to do that the right way. To complement that, although they are quote unquote HD video solutions, they're very heavily compressed. And that's bad for a variety of reasons. The color depth, the actual sharpness of the picture, the resolution of the picture, and of course the delay that is required to compress the video signal in the way that it does this. Varying degrees of support. These are all free tools, so support may vary. There's actually much more support through the actual user community than from the manufacturers in most cases. And as I said already, the latency is quite high because of the baked-in compression. The next technology, which is this technology that Tom uses quite extensively, is H323. And people will be familiar with this because of its prominence in traditional business workspaces, in higher education environments. Good side of it is that they're generally low bandwidth, and they do, because they are specialized devices, offer somewhat superior audio and video to the software tools we just left. And they also have added security function if that's important. For us, that's not such a big deal. We're not sharing very sensitive data beyond the actual learning that's taking place in our online environments. One other aspect of these that's quite useful is simple multi-point functionality. So connecting multiple locations in one space is quite easy for most of them. They have echo cancellation and error correction. So if you don't have an ideal network environment, they have some tools to help overcome issues related to that environment. Some detracting aspects of this technology are that they work best when two devices by the same manufacturer connect, even though it's a communications standard. And for instance, a Cisco video conferencing unit can call a Polycom video conferencing unit. The experience will be superior if it's Polycom to Polycom connection or Cisco to Cisco instead of a Polycom connection. They're very expensive, on the order of between $10,000 and $20,000 US still. And that's been the price point essentially for the past 15 years. And in our case, this is not so important if your primary use is for verbal communication, but the echo cancellation, which is a help in most instances, can be detrimental to very dynamic sound sources like classical music in our case. So it's helpful for people who are new to the experience to help mitigate echo problems, but it can also be problematic. UltraGrid is a software solution developed by our friends from the Czech Republic. It was originally used as a high-resolution video streaming technology to be able to allow for telemedicine practice, and has since been adopted for the performing arts. What's great about UltraGrid is that it uses commodity hardware. So basically any USB audio devices or video devices or FireWire video and audio devices or Lightning video and audio devices, USB 3, basically any commercial video or audio device will function with UltraGrid because of its wide device support. It can do beyond 4K resolution, which is unique among these tools. They have excellent technical support from the team. If you're deploying this for the first time, the Czech Republic team will help you do that. Just make sure to give them plenty of time before it actually happens, so they have time to assist you. It supports a variety of operating systems as well, which is really fantastic and unique among these tools. And latency is as low in the software to 40 milliseconds, which is pretty fast compared to everything we've looked at so far. Some of the downsides to this application, some versions of it are command line only, so not so accessible for the average user. If you're running it on Linux, it is much more difficult to install simply because of the nature of the different flavors of Linux and branches of development there. And if you're doing high bandwidth or multi-channel audio transmissions, then you need a lot of consistent bandwidth to do that. Lola, which is Claudio's tool, and I think if I've got the schedule right, he's already explained this, so I'll try to breeze past this one. But they originally released this software in 2011. At the time, it was black and white only. It remains a Windows-only tool, but it really is groundbreaking in the sense of latency. So they've been able to limit the latency of the software to 3 to 5 milliseconds. So combine that with whatever the delay or latency of your network link to who you're connecting with, and that's what you're working with. And in our cases, what that means is as long as you're within this 1,000-mile geographic radius of your location, you can actually play in sync with other people. The delay is that short, especially if you're on a research and education network. Some other things to understand about Lola include its variable resolution support. It can do multi-channel audio, although for the most part, people are using it for stereo transmissions right now. Although there are some really cool things happening with recording studios and remote recording sessions that make use of multi-channel streaming. The app software itself is actually quite simple to operate. So the entire program consists of one screen essentially with some menu options. And of course, it works with professional audio and video standards. So that's really great from a quality standpoint. The downsides to Lola are that it requires substantial bandwidth compared to most of these tools. And beyond that bandwidth, it must be a particular type of bandwidth, meaning connections free of firewalls or security measures. Because of the nature of the type of traffic Lola generates, it does not work with firewalls. So that can be a battle with university IT departments in some cases. And there's only certain cameras that we can use right now. So it runs on a machine vision camera that's USB 3 based, but there are only 2 manufacturers that make cameras that the software supports. So you're pretty limited in terms of what kind of lenses you can use, and who you can actually purchase cameras from. The piece that Tom got his presentation with leverage these types of devices, which are essentially appliances designed for one purpose and one purpose only, which is to stream video and audio in bidirectionally. They are where the Polycoms and the H.323 systems are expensive. These are next level expensive, if that translates. So the NVTP, which is another solution developed by the Czech Republic Research and Education Network, is actually much more affordable these days. I think the limited version of what they produce is something like $5,000 to $7,000, which is much better than it has been in the past. But the Nimbra systems, which are what were used for that theater production, are upwards of $20,000 to $40,000, depending on what types of video, audio, and networking modules you put in them. The good news is that they are standalone, and basically once you've configured them and established a connection with your partner, they are very easy to reconnect and very, very stable once the network has been prepared appropriately. They're also very low latency in the same way that Lola is, because of the way that video compression and encoding is done. They also rely on high bandwidth. However, that is a variable bandwidth utilization based on how compressed the video signal is, and they support 4K to 8K resolutions at this time. So this graph here is going back to those metrics that I started with, doing a direct comparison one to another tool for each of those. So for ease of use, thankfully there are plenty of options here if this is your primary need. And I should have said this in the beginning, but the reason I'm talking about a bunch of different tools is because we at New World Symphony do not have a specific need or desire to use any one tool. For us, we let the use determine whatever tool is required. So it entirely depends on what your objectives are. If it's educational in nature and immediacy or low latency is not the highest priority, then maybe you want to use something like H.323, which is a little more stable, easier to use, doesn't require as much networking capacity as Lola, UltraGrid, or the Nimbras. So I say that to mean that the phrase I use is technology agnostic. We don't care which technology we use. It's more important that it's in the service of whatever the activity is. So moving from ease of use to quality, far and away UltraGrid and Nimbra win in this category. Lola is close behind, but Lola is limited in terms of what it can do from a video resolution standpoint. It doesn't support, at least in a published version, any kind of 4K or high resolution video, whereas Nimbra and UltraGrid do. So if video is your biggest priority for your use, if you're working in theater or dance, then maybe UltraGrid, Nimbra, or the NVTP system are the one to choose. Latency here, the two clear winners are Nimbra and Lola. Those are the only two tools that offer true immediacy and the ability to perform in sync with one another across a great distance, assuming performing in sync is your goal. Accessibility. So while Nimbra and Lola provide the best in terms of latency and video performance in some cases, they are the least accessible of these tools, simply because the user base is not very broad. So if you want to use Nimbra, Lola, or UltraGrid even, often you'll have to educate your partner on how to use those tools and participate in preparing the network environment to allow them to work. This is an intentionally confusing slide because I want to again demonstrate that no one tool is a silver bullet, as they say. None of these tools is the best tool in all situations. So it's really important to determine, and if it makes sense for you to use these metrics of ease of use, quality, latency, accessibility, use those metrics and decide which are the priority for your given application or use, and then let that determine which technology you use to provide interaction and the media component. So this is just to sum up kind of where we're at in terms of needs in this community. The solutions are still rather expensive. So I talked about the immense cost of even H.323 systems, but also Nimbra, MBTP. Lola is actually fairly economical compared to those two. It runs on a modern Windows PC, and then the additional computer and audio devices needed are another $800 US or so. So for about $3,000 to $4,000, you can build a stable Lola box. That's not the case with those other solutions. Now that we've limited the amount of latency that the software creates, hardware creates, actually the network connections are the slowest element in the chain. So not really a ton we can do about that, because there is the real physical limitation of the speed of light and networking technology, but it's good to know that that is a problem to focus on going forward. Display technology, especially if latency or low latency is a big factor for you, is tough, because most of the display technologies, aside from some gaming monitors, are so slow that they really actually are the thing that make playing or performing in sync together impossible, simply because the delays are too long in producing an image on screen. So have to be very careful about what displays or projectors or TVs that you use. And then finally, and this may change soon with the adoption and deployment of 5G wireless networks, we'll see, but physical connections are still required for all of these tools to function in this way. So we're still tethered to the wall, connected to the wall. The next few slides are just screenshots from productions either by collaborators of ours or with projects that we were directly involved in. The Infinite Bridge was a immersive theatrical piece that involved live animation, algorithmic animation, combined with a musical ensemble that was distributed across Northern Europe. Near in the Distance is a series of productions that are produced by the Austrian Research and Education Network called ACONET. And these are really, from a multimedia standpoint, some of the most impressive audiovisual productions I've ever seen using this distant technology. They leverage a lot of combinations of Lola and UltraGrid to produce these kind of really next level media productions. Global Audition Training Project, this is specific to our world in that it's orchestra auditions are notoriously difficult to win. So and because of just the decline of large ensembles kind of across the world, our musicians are having to travel further and further internationally to take professional auditions. So we use Polycom technology to create these mock audition environments where we have partners in parts of Europe and Eastern Asia who provide jury members and provide kind of geographic specific comments and coaching in regards to musical repertoire and the audition experience. This is a fun project from a few years ago where we connected dancers, break dancers in Miami with dancers of a form known as JIT, J-I-T, in Detroit, Michigan for an urban dance cipher or competition with music ensemble that was split between both locations. This particular use was with Lola. So as far as what's coming up for us, we're obviously, like many people, looking at how immersive and augmented reality are going to change both our performance and educational programs. This is a screenshot from performance of the Royal Shakespeare Company, which leveraged Magic Leap's augmented reality platform. And Magic Leap is a Florida company pretty close to New World Symphony. So we have a working relationship with them. We haven't done anything yet, but there's a lot of interest in exploring what their glasses can do for our audiences and for our students in terms of teaching. 360 video is something we've been doing for a couple years now. It lends itself best to environments like this, where there are performers positioned around the camera or visual canvases that encircle the camera and the audience encircling the camera. It's best in cases where there is something of visual interest happening at all times in all directions. Another augmented reality slide just showing some of the potential we're looking at from a music education standpoint. Combining augmented virtual reality with binaural audio and ambisonic audio for truly three-dimensional audio is something we are also experimenting with to provide a truly immersive experience in these cases. Here's just a shot of this is a really nerdy subject, but basically the one thing that's inhibiting this work so far is trying to create realistic filtering and effect of the audio as someone's head moves around in a virtual space. So in order to do that effectively, one must measure what's called the HRTF of an individual person's head. So right now, this is a very complex and expensive process to do, but there are certain software entities who are working on making this algorithmic so we don't actually have to measure this anymore. Once that happens, then we think there will be some opportunity for truly immersive, personalized audio experiences. And then finally, haptic transfer. So the idea that someone can actually feel or smell something that's happening far away. So how do we add other senses into this immersive environment? And touch is obviously very important when it comes to music performance. So that's something we are investigating. That's all my slides. I wish I had more fun videos to show everybody, and I'll stop sharing my screen. So I can totally answer any questions. I haven't seen the chat room while I've been showing that slide, so let me see if there's any questions I can respond to. So I think there's some discussion about what platform we're using to connect for this presentation, and they are correct that it is a WebRTC platform, which is a standard. Let's see. So Maria asked a question about the delay or latency being used in the visual or audio production. So yes, there's a whole community of people who try to leverage the delay or latency in a creative way. Typically, what that results in is more improvisational art. in the end, which can be quite rewarding, can be quite impactful. For our sake, we're a classical music organization, so the capability of playing in sync together across great distances is kind of where our focus is. But yes, you can totally use latency as an artistic device. I would say the only caveat with that is that latency doesn't always stay the same, even between two locations, day to day or hour to hour. So latency between two locations can change very subtly or in very substantial ways. So in my experience, it has not been very successful to base any kind of effect in an artistic creation on a set time variable. So like if you take, for instance, the idea of an audio delay, if you're counting on an audio delay of 120 milliseconds for some kind of artistic device, that may throw off the whole thing if you connect one day and it's actually 200 milliseconds or 80 milliseconds. And that particular effect changes, which can be interesting as well, can totally ruin it. It's really up to the individual situation and project. So Delma, I don't know if you're there. I see some folks still in the video chat, but
yes,
I know we're going over time, so I'll take any questions if there are any questions left. Otherwise, well, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so
Carrie
much.
actually asked the questions about experiments in reverse delay in recordings. Carrie, if you're still on the line, maybe you can explain what you mean.
Oh yeah. So if in older technologies, if the recordings were sort of laggy, then the recording would have been with lag, I guess. And I was wondering if there's experiments in removing that now that the technology's improved. So you could...
Yeah, so there are actually a lot of, not a lot, but there are a few audio production platforms. I'm thinking mainly of Cubase, which is made by a company called Steinberg. They actually have a commercial tool that's designed to allow people to remotely record between two locations. And the way it works is the recording studio triggers the recording, which starts playback, and then the recording on the remote player's side is actually recorded to their local computer at very high quality. And then in the back end is transmitted back to the server location. And then it's kind of all the times are removed and they're synced up. So yes, there are people doing that in the recording world, most definitely.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I bet it's been a long day. I thank you for your attention.
Very interesting.
Thank you, Delma. Take care, everybody.